Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2016 Chevy Silverado 1500, we're going to be showing you how to install the B&W underbed trailer hitch for B&W companion fifth wheels. But before we do that, let's take a moment, check this out, and make sure it's going to work for you. B&W makes this kit here specifically designed for these pickup trucks, whether it be a 5.5 foot bed like we have here today, or a 6.5 foot bed. So this will work with both of those. If you happen to have a long bed, B&W makes a separate kit that'll work the same way, that's compatible with that. Something you really need to think about when using this type of kit with these short bed trucks is going to be cab clearance. Being that the hitch sits pretty far forward, since we have a short bed, there's not a ton of space here. So depending on what type of trailer you're going to be pulling, whenever you make real tight turns, what could potentially happen is that trailer can make contact with your cab corners. And it's really just dependent on your setup. You know, if you have maybe a car hauler or something like that, where really there's not a lot going on up front, you'll probably be in good shape. But maybe you have a camper that you converted to a goose box, you know, and them campers overhang, you might run into some issues there. If that is the case, B&W does make another ball that you can use. It's an offset ball. We'll drop into the hitch and set that attachment point back about 4 inches, and that should be able to buy you a little more space there. One of the cool things about this setup too, you kind of get 2 hitches for the price of one almost. You know, not only can you put a goose ball in here and tow your gooseneck trailer, you can also use a fifth wheel head. B&W makes a hitch called the Companion, which utilizes this setup. It'll drop into place and give you that fifth wheel attachment. So if you end up changing trailers or have multiple trailers, whatever the case may be, you know, you'll be in pretty good shape. Now with that said, especially with these short beds, if you do end up using a Companion, you're going to want to make sure to get the sliding type one. Again, with the clearance that you may run into, having the sliding hitch will allow you to set that attachment point further back and give you enough room. If you're familiar with the towing world at all, chances are pretty good you've probably heard of the B&W name, and there's a reason for it. They make excellent hitches and products all around for that matter. The quality construction is awesome, and when it comes to the fit and finish, it really doesn't get much better. You know, even with our setup here, it looks really good, you know, about as good as it can get, at least in my opinion. If it were me, I think the B&W is worth it. Just the good craftsmanship and the ease of use, and everything goes together like you'd expect it to. Something pretty cool with the setup as well is it's a turnover ball, right? So when you're not using it, you're actually able to store it in the hitch. That way it's not rolling around in the back of your truck. You know, you're trying to keep track of it or whatever. You can always keep it inside of the hitch and it's ready for you whenever you need it. The ball is going to be a 2 5/16 in diameter, pretty much a standard for those gooseneck trailers. The safety chain openings are spring-loaded, relatively large. You know, just about any hook should fit around them, and they sit nice and flush whenever you're not using them, so they're should help limit rattling and whatnot. And having them like that is going to help with full bed access. So since the hitch sits underneath the bed of your truck, hardly takes up any space at all and isn't going to get in the way when you go to load in other items into the back here. Underneath the truck, this is a look at the hitch all mounted up, and even on the bottom side, don't really take up a whole lot of space, you know, and it has a powder coated finish. B&W's finish is actually pretty good, at least in my opinion. So with everything being underneath, I think that's important, and this should hold up for quite some time without getting rusted out or anything. And one of the big questions we get is when doing this type of setup, is suspension enhancements going to be possible? And it really just depends on what you're going for. A lot of people wonder about airbags, and it's kind of a hard question to answer across the board, just depending on what type of airbag you got. And some of them would probably work, some wouldn't. It really just depends. So usually you can find that information through the airbag manufacturer and see how it bolts up and kind of get you going there. Something that I can speak to for sure though, what would work would be different types of suspension enhancements. For example, a Timbren or a Sumo spring even. Those essentially more or less replace these jounce bumpers right here, and that's how they work. Those would work for sure. You wouldn't run into any interference as far as that goes, or even a leaf spring enhancement. Roadmaster makes a really nice setup, as well as many others that kind of go on top of the leaf springs, and with a setup like that, shouldn't have any clearance issues either. I am a fan of the handle mechanisms on these B&W hitches, and this is how you're actually going to operate it. So when the handle's in, it's locked. Everything's locked into position. When you want to unlock it, it just pulls right out, and you just bump it to the left a little bit. It finds that catch. It's easy to operate, and this is going to keep everything opened up. As far as the weight ratings go, it's going to have a 7,500 pound vertical load limit, so that's going to be the amount of weight pushing down, and a 30,000 pound maximum gross trailer weight rating, which will be the amount of weight pulling on the hitch. Definitely want to check in your Chevy's owner's manual though, and never exceed the weight rating of what your truck can actually handle. So you definitely want to use the lowest of those numbers. Something I always recommend too with a setup like this is in-bed wiring. That gives you a 7-way at the end of your truck bed. That way you can plug your trailer wiring harness right into that and not have to drape it over your tailgate and deal with trying to plug it into the bumper and things like that. Other than that, at the end of the day, if I was going to put a hitch like this in my truck, it would be this one. B&W you really can't go wrong with, and a lot of people are happy with them, and I can see why, because they just work and they look good and everything else. As far as the installation goes, on this truck it really wasn't too bad, honestly. The worst part is going to be torquing down all the hardware. There's quite a bit of it, and you don't have a ton of room. But as far as the hitch going up and not really having to modify a ton of stuff, it really wasn't too bad. So stay focused. You should be in pretty good shape. And with that in mind, why don't we go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, you're going to be underneath the back of your truck, and first thing you want to do is temporarily lower and remove the spare tire, which I've done. It just gives you a lot more room to work. And we're going to be lowering our exhaust down some too. So prior to doing that, I like to take a strap and just run it from side to side. That way the exhaust will have some support. We can kind of help control how fast and how far we actually let it come down. There's going to be 3 rubber isolator hangers like this one here that we can remove to let the exhaust come down. So I sprayed them down with soapy water, and then you can just kind of work the exhaust back and forth. It helps to loosen everything up. You can take a big pry bar and just work one end of that hanger off from our exhaust system here. There's that one, and then there's 2 more if you just continue to follow the exhaust forward. The other 2 are just behind our muffler, and we're going to use that same technique to get those off. So once you get those 3 removed, you can loosen up the strap a little bit and let the exhaust come down a little ways. We're going to have this heat shield here. We're going to have to cut a section of it out. That way it don't interfere with our hitch. And so you'll have this hat channel here essentially directly above the rear axle. And then the next hat channel towards the front of the truck, that's a section of heat shield we're going to remove. So you can use some snips or some other type of cutters that you got. I'm just going to use a multi-tool and get this section out of our way here. Once you get that end cut, moving up to the next hat channel right here. This is where I'm going to make the additional cut to get that section removed. this piece out of her way. And if you didn't quite make a completely flush cut with this hat channel, if you got a little overhang, make sure to clean that up. You can kind of flatten it out with a hammer or cut a little bit more out of there. You want to get in the bed of your truck and you can measure. That way we know where we need to drill out our opening for our hitch. And there's measurements in the instructions, so make sure to follow those. A couple words of advice: whenever you're measuring this, make sure you actually measure from the end of the bed and not the tailgate, you know, so from here up. And if you have a spray-in bed liner, anything along those lines, compensate for that, you know, because that does add a little bit of space there. So mark that out, and then you can measure from wheel well tub to wheel well tub, split the difference, and that'll give you your center where you can put your mark, and that's where we're going to need to drill. Our center here is where I'm going to drill, and I'm going to start with a pilot bit, just a smaller bit. Go through that. And then I'm going to switch out to a hole saw. And what I like to do is just take that hole saw, drill it through a piece of plywood. And that's going to kind of help prevent this from skipping all over the place. We'll get our opening created here. Came back with some sandpaper and just kind of smoothed out this edge here. That way we don't have any sharp metal. And since we have bare metal now, I'm going to come back with a paint stick and put a layer over it just to help prevent rust. Use spray paint too, whatever you got. We'll do the trick. If your truck has these wheel well liners, we're going to need to get it removed. And I'm going to do just the passenger side one for now. If later on, if the driver's side one's going to be in the way, we'll pull that one out, but we'll see if we can get away with just doing this one for the time being. But there's going to be a handful of T15 Torx bit screws kind of just run throughout the whole liner that's holding it in place. So we'll just work our way around here and get them all removed. To get all those fasteners removed, you can kind of peel down on the edge of the liner all the way around here and just work it out of position. Once the wheel well liner's out of the way, you'll have this hat channel here almost directly above the rear axle, and in front of it you're going to need to measure out. You can follow the instructions and create a little opening here. There's this flange that hangs down that'll be in the way when we try to put some components in. And so I'm going to cut that material out. I think the easiest way will be just to use a rotary tool, but a multi-tool or whatever else will work fine as well, whatever you think. We'll get this out of the way here. I did the same thing to our little flange here, smoothed it out, put some paint on it so don't rust. And we can get our front cross member in place now. So the holes, you're going to want those to face towards the back of the truck. Just like this. And we're going to take it and slide it almost all the way across here. We'll probably go about something like that. Let it sit there, move underneath the bed of the truck. With the cross member in about this location here, the second hole over from the end of the cross member, from the driver's side, you can take one of these bolts, push it through like so, and then they give you this O-ring take that O-ring and run it over the bolt, and that's essentially just a placeholder. You know, it'll keep that bolt in position because it'll be kind of hard to get to whenever we get the cross member where we need it to go. And then you're just going to continue to slide this over, and on the driver's side you do have your brake lines and some wiring and stuff. That's why there's a notch kind of cut out in this cross member, so be conscious of that. Kind of roll it in place and get it about 4 inches in front of the center hole that we created. As far as the rear cross member goes, that's going to be this piece here, and this has threaded holes in it. And so something I suggest doing is take one of the bolts that they give you and make sure you can run it through easily. Sometimes powder coat kind of gets piled up in there and makes it really hard to get started, and then it's really a pain when you're underneath the truck trying to hold heavy stuff and get a bolt started. So I checked all of ours. We're in good shape. And just for a reference too, so these holes are offset, right? They're not in the center of this bar. The side that they're closer to, that's going to be the bottom. So when we put this in here or under the truck, you know, we'll eventually kind of rotate it like this. And when you rotate it, you want those offset holes to be pointing down towards the ground. We'll just do essentially the same exact thing with this one that we did with our front cross member. Same's gonna hold true with this. Just watch brake lines and stuff. And try to rotate this here. If you're having a hard time being able to rotate it, you can always take an adjustable wrench, and that usually give you a little more leverage to be able to do that. Just gonna roughly center it and push it all the way back as far as we can go against this hat channel here. Put our center section in, and you can tell the ball opening there is offset. You want that to be towards the back of the truck. And a quick way just to kind of make sure everything's going as planned here, the handle mechanism, that's gonna be on the driver's side. So we'll set it up in there just like this. With our center section too, if you remember that bolt that we put in the front cross member with the O-ring on it, you're going to want that to go through this corner hole here on our center section. And I'll try to get this lined up and get that through. And then for the time being, we're just going to take a bolt, put it through a couple of openings there, so this will at least kind of stay in place. For the center section, so where it butts up with this beam here that has the threaded holes in it, the bolts that you're going to put in, there's going to be 4 of them, so 2 on each side. Just a bolt there, and then you can put on a split lock washer and then a flat washer. You're just going to get all of these started hand tight. For the front cross member, you're going to have 3 attachment points, so the one on each end. So driver's side, we had that one that we put the O-ring on. Over here on the passenger side, you have this one, and then there's one in the center. But what you'll do is take your bolt, push it through. You'll have a flat washer, split lock washer, and a hex nut. We'll get all these hand tight. Something that I like to do is kind of build this little apparatus here. What it's going to accomplish, it'll take our hitch and pull it up tight against the bottom of the truck and kind of keep it there. Because it's a good idea to come in here, make sure everything's lined up and everything. Essentially all I did, just took some blocks of wood and got a little distance over it, and then just took a strap, connected the strap to the little bar inside of the hitch there and pulled it tight. Move back to your wheel wells now, and we can get our side plates ready to be installed. So first thing, you have this oval shaped hole. We're going to be using that as an attachment point. And if you have any rust or undercoating or stuff built up in there, come in with some sandpaper and just kind of freshen it up, get it clean. Then you're going to have this spacer block and a carriage bolt. All right, put the carriage bolt through there. And you want to have all this hardware that I'm getting ready to show you ready, but you essentially do one of these deals to get the whole block inside of the frame, and you want to, you know, hold on to the bolt there. And then this piece is going to go over it. And you want that to line up in the frame there, just like that. From there, there's this retainer that threads on. You want to be applying pressure to this bolt the whole time while you're doing this, that way it don't come out of place. We'll run this all the way down. Get it as tight as you can by hand. And you know, everything felt good. Didn't feel like that thing popped out or anything. And if you want to, you can take a screwdriver, just kind of bump this a couple more times to get it tight. So I think we're pretty good there. And then we'll take a flat washer, put that right on over the bolt. We'll grab our side plate now, and these are going to be side specific, so check the diagram in your instructions. One of the easy ways to tell, this long portion here, that's going to face towards the back of the truck. And so that hole there is going to go over the stud, set like that. Then you can put on flat washer, a split lock washer, and a hex nut, and get it hand tight. For the front here, where the side plate will attach to our front cross member, you take a regular hex bolt, push that on through, and another flat washer, split lock washer, and a hex nut. For the rear cross member, this on our side plate here, just another hex bolt, split lock washer, flat washer, and that's actually just going to thread right into the rear cross member. We're also going to have this here clamp. The top, you can see there's a little indentation there, so you want that to face up. That little hole there in the bottom corner, that's going to face down towards the ground. And this is going to wrap around the frame. Make sure if you have any wires or anything like that on the back side of the frame, you're not going to pinch them, and that's actually what this indentation is for on the driver's side. There's some lines there that this gives it that clearance it needs. But take that, run it through our side plate. And then you can take a split lock washer, put that over, and a hex nut. Get a few threads started on that one. I'll do the same thing for this one down here. Over here on the driver's side, I did the same exact thing to get this side plate loosely installed as well. And I did actually have to remove this fender, or wheel well liner rather. That way we had enough space, we could actually kind of see what was going on. But it comes out the same exact way that we removed the passenger one. Tighten down all of our hardware, and you want to follow the sequence that we're about to do when you're snugging up the bolts and torquing them down. So first things first, you want to do all the bolts that are attaching our center section to our crossmember rails. So I have a 3/4 inch socket and wrench. We'll get that done. Once the center section's done, you can focus on the clamp, so that part that U-bolt essentially that went around our frame. When you're doing these, you want to kind of alternate, so get the bottom snug, then work up to the top. Just kind of alternate back and forth. You want that clamp to be drawn together evenly. Then tighten up these bolts here, holding the side plates to our cross members. Make sure you do that to the other side, which I've done, and then once that is complete, we can snug up this fastener right here. So once everything is snug, you need to make sure and come back with a torque wrench and tighten down all the hardware to the amount specified in the instructions in that same sequence that we just did. Once you got everything all torqued down, you can come back underneath the truck, and on the driver's side, we have our handle. You take the rubber end, put it through that opening, and I'll work it through. It's pretty tight, so you just have to kind of find that perfect opening to get everything through. But once you do, the end of that will line up with the mechanism there. You'll take this small carriage bolt, put that through the mechanism, through the eyelet on the handle, and on the back side, we can install this flange nut. Once it is hand tight, you come back with a 1/2 inch size socket and snug it down. Drill out our safety chain openings now, and there's going to be multiple sets of holes in the center section, and you want to choose the ones that are lined up with the corrugation in our bed, meaning, so for example, these here are pretty much flat against the bottom of our bed, while these here, the corrugation goes up, so there's a little gap in between there. So that's how you figure out what ones you need to use. In our case, we're using the inside ones. So we'll take our drill bit and create some holes. I got rid of our apparatus, move that out of the way, and then our holes where they come through, I just took some sandpaper and cleaned them up a little bit and put our paint on there, just like how we did this big opening here. Gave it a few minutes to dry, and now you can take the U-bolts for our safety chains, drop those right on down through. Underneath the truck where our U-bolts come down, on each leg of it, you can take one of these springs. Big end of the spring is going to go up. You'll take the hex nut, get that on. And then we're just going to tighten up the nuts until they're flush with the ends of the U-bolts. So about like that. At this point, we're pretty much wrapped up underneath the truck. So I went ahead and just rehung our exhaust the opposite way that we removed it. Sprayed the hangers down. You can just push them back in place by hand. And you can also reinstall your spare tire. I'm going to hold off on that because I'm going to do some more work. I'm going to be doing airbags on this particular truck, so I'm not going to have that in my way. And I recommend that as well if you're going to be doing embed wiring or other stuff, go ahead and leave it removed for the time being. If you did have the wheel well liners, you can go ahead and get them reinstalled the opposite way that you removed them, except over here on the driver's side, you're going to have to cut out a little opening. That way it'll make it easier to get your hand in there and actually operate the handle for your hitch. With this, it's kind of almost like a tough cardboard. You can just use a pair of snips or really good scissors and be able to cut all this stuff out. With all that complete, that will finish up our look at and our installation of the B&W underbed hitch on our 2016 Chevrolet Silverado 1500.